This episode of GenreVision is brought to you by our premium subscribers at patreon.com/GenreVision. For $5 a month, our premium subscribers get access to an ever-growing library of exclusive bonus content, including weekly pre-show recordings, peeks behind the scenes, and a big currently consuming session every month. Sign up at patreon.com/GenreVision.
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is GenreVision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And we are concluding Screwy September with the double feature of Junior and Willy Milly. Before we do that, just a quick call to action. If you love what we do here on GenreVision, we are just straight up begging at this point for you to go to the Apple Podcast Store and leave a rating and review for the show. It helps us out so much. We had some recent reviews in the last couple weeks, and if you do leave a written review, we will feature it here on the following episode. And those reviews help us climb the rankings on Apple Podcast, which means the show gets more visibility, which means we can potentially get new listeners, and which means we can grow the show. But it's kind of integral to keep those reviews coming, because once they slump off and you haven't reached kind of a certain plateau, you get knocked back down in the ratings and your show disappears. So if you have left a review for us, thank you so much. It is helping us out immensely. If you've not left a review and you really love the show, please, please, please go do that at the Apple Podcast Store.
What he said. All right.
It begins.
Yeah, that's all of our calls to action this week. I've forgotten. Is this a versus or a double feature, Drew?
It was a double feature. Okay, loyal listeners, we gotta reveal something to you. We picked Screwy September because normally we don't really cover comedies on this show. Sometimes we will get genre movies that also act as comedies, but for the most part, it's not a genre that we have kind of singled out in the past. And we wanted to rectify that. And I will say that until this episode, Screwy September has been pretty successful.
Yeah, I would argue that is correct. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the movies that we've covered, and I think we had really good discussions and good episodes to come out of them. And we left this double feature last because the first film we're going to talk about, Junior, is probably the most notable out of the ones that we covered, I think, this month. Then we double featured it with Willy Milly, which is a movie that was brought to our attention by loyal listener JT. We'd never heard of it, and it sounded so wacky that we thought, hey, let's cover it. And we'll get to Willy Milly in a little bit. But first we have to talk about Junior. And Junior is a movie that I know has been covered on other noteworthy movie discussion podcasts about bad movies. It's a movie that Travis and I had never seen before. All I knew about it was the poster, in which Arnold is staring slack-jawed at the camera, is holding his giant pregnant belly as Danny DeVito listens to it by pressing a stethoscope against it, and Emma Thompson slumps over his shoulder. That was all the information I had on Junior.
Yeah, and it had kind of reached this sort of cultural status where we regarded it as the kind of movie a movie star, an A-lister movie star, makes when they begin to parody their own career. You know, in the Adam Sandler movie Funny People, you know, his walls in that movie are covered in these posters for fake movies that never actually got made, but they legitimately look like the kind of movies that Adam Sandler made when his career began to get to the, like, I don't give a fuck stage. Like, this is silly, but it pays really well. Mm-hmm. And what I love about guys like Sandler, who are willing to star in these like really like legitimately bad and goofy, awful movies, is like, he's totally unpretentious about it. He's openly said, like, hey, I like taking my family on nice vacations. And you know what? Good for you, buddy. Yeah. I think that's a fantastic outlook. And I feel like Arnold was at that stage in his career with this film. And it boggles my mind to think that some people interpreted this turn from him as a prestige turn, because Junior is far from prestigious.
Well, you mentioned prestigious because, as we found out before starting this recording, this movie has Golden Globes attached to its name.
For acting, 2 of them. For Schwarzenegger and Emma Thompson. Blah! Excuse me.
So
Broadcasting my feelings a little.
Look, there's going to be no hiding it here, folks. And I'm going to, this is a lot to say before we even talk about the movie itself. We've talked on this show about our relationship with movies over the years. And one of the things that I have really personally attempted over the years, especially ever since knowing Travis and how he has positively affected my relationship with art, in particular the art of cinema, is that I don't want to hate movies anymore. I think hating movies is a waste of time and energy and emotional stress. And at the end of the day, no movie is so bad that it is worth hating, to feel genuine hate towards. And Junior is the first time I have hated a movie in a long time.
Now, I don't know if I hated Junior. Probably not. I think it's like nuclear level trash. I said on Twitter that one of the movies this week is like nuclear trash that should be jettisoned into the sun. That is Junior. It is truly awful. It is now at the very bottom of my list of the library titles that we've watched this year. I mean, I think Howling 2 is a better movie than this, which says a lot. And because you and I had a bit of a crisis before reviewing Howling 2 of like, are we wasting our listeners' time by talking about this movie?
Yes, and here's the thing. Junior is not only the worst movie that we've covered on this show this year. Junior is the worst movie I have watched in 2020. In a year that will be defined by its awfulness, Junior has taken the cake as the worst movie I had to sit through. And look, there's nobody to blame but ourselves. Like, we chose to do this, so I acknowledge that fully.
Yeah, but you and I had no idea the kind of like shit that this movie was going to get us into here. So, okay. It's a very high concept movie, but a lot of people get confused by the term high concept and they think that it means lofty or that it's intellectual. And that's not true at all. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. It's an image that sells a movie that kind of tells you everything you think you need to know about it, or like a single title that sells the entire concept of the movie. Snakes on a Plane, extraordinarily high concept. The title tells you everything you need to know. In this case, this movie was sold as a high concept film using that poster. And it's very clear that that was an effective marketing campaign because that poster has lasted. It's had more staying power than the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
More as like something people remember as a footnote in Arnold's very strange career as an A-list movie star. And yes, it is the movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger gets pregnant. Arnold Schwarzenegger carries a baby to full term in his body. Yes, if you're looking for the movie to deliver on the promise of that high concept, then I guess the movie does that. Is that a victory?
Well,
no.
That's beside the point. There are things in Junior that happen that are bad, but are expectedly kind of bad. Because look, we went into this making this double feature expecting like, oh, we're going to have two pretty bad movies, but they will be comically bad and we can riff on them or kind of maybe find things that do work in them that other people just aren't going to see because they're overwhelmed by their comical awfulness. So, for example, Arnold has this movie opens with a dream sequence in which Arnold dreams he's in a library and he just finds a baby that's being unattended, and then he is met with an entire room full of babies. There's another dream sequence in which Arnold is, after having the procedure done that's going to get him pregnant, dreams that a nurse brings him a baby, and he looks at it and it has Arnold's horribly digitally grafted on face on it, screaming. That kind of stuff is bad. Like, it's fine.
It's bad, but at least it's interesting. Like, to start the movie off with a nightmare sequence for this character that is actually very directly thematic, stating like this character is very afraid of this thing. That's strong character work. It's fun. And it's fun to see Arnold cast against type. I liked that aspect of this, in theory. And it's a stylistic statement to open up with a nightmare. I did think it got into the hackiness, and I rarely use the word hack or hacky or, to describe any kind of writing, because I think it's a horrible overused term that just means bad writing. But to me, this is so cliche because I thought, oh, well, at least they're not going to open this movie up with the character waking up in the morning. And then it's exactly what they do after they get out of the nightmare. He shoots straight up out of bed and goes to work. And I wish Arnold Schwarzenegger's character was anything but like this super boring deadpan. Like Arnold does deadpan really well. The Terminator works primarily because of his sort of deadpan delivery, both in the horror of the character and the comedy. Like the more comedic aspects of the Terminator character work because he's quite a good deadpan actor and a fairly good comedian. But this movie takes his deadpan stuff and just makes it instantly boring.
Yes, that is one of the appraisals that is correct about Junior. Here's the thing. The plot of this movie, the premise that you're being sold on, should be wacky. It's a man getting pregnant. Okay.
Right.
Great.
This should be nutty. This should be like Joe Dante nutty.
But the thing is, Junior is so assured in the belief that it is doing something important, that it is making a statement about many things. Mostly, if I was to boil down the movie's position, it would be about men don't know how hard women have it. And that's certainly the position Junior thinks it takes. But in its execution of that message, Junior reveals itself to be not only misogynistic in its views of women and pretty much doing nothing but checking the boxes of stereotypical behavior that has been culturally implanted about women in society. It does things that shows itself to be anti-queer. There is a bunch of, I won't say a bunch, but there is a significant enough amount of gay panic moments between Arnold's character and Danny DeVito's character, because Arnold's character is staying with Danny DeVito while this pregnancy experiment is going on, and they have to keep it secret.
Yeah.
And the movie reveals itself to be a pro-life movie. Now, here's the thing, and this is potentially going to get me in trouble, because this is a debate that has raged on for decades and decades, and everybody has their own feelings about it. Looking at the binary, I will speak for Travis here, will fall on the pro-choice side. However, that is not even my anger towards Junior in this regard. My anger for Junior comes from the fact that it is a pro-life movie that thinks it is pro-choice.
Well, there's some definite confusion of messaging here. Like it's not exactly sure at sometimes what it wants to say and how, and sometimes when it feels assured in its messaging, it doesn't really execute the telling of the message in a way that works at all. I don't know if I agree that the movie feels itself to be important. What I feel that the movie wants and strives for is to be a brand of observational comedy that is sincere, heartfelt, relevant in a way that is not just timely, but like timeless, like sort of evergreen observations on the way men and women relate. And then it also tries to be timely with talking about fertility treatments and modern medicine. The fact that it is trying to offer any kind of intelligent observation, which I do believe the movie was attempting. It was using certain tools to try and make witty or clever or smart observations about the sort of battle of the sexes stuff. The fact that it thinks it's trying to do any of that stuff, I find angering. So I think you and I are on similar levels. We're just like, there is so much sociopolitically in the bones of this movie that you and I just find vile. Okay, it is politically and socially opposed to what you and I feel, or is delivering messages in a way that you and I find especially clumsy. Okay, that is a huge part of why you and I dislike this movie. Can't overlook it. It seems like it's at points designed to piss you and me off.
Well, here's the thing. That is absolutely true. There are other factors that amplify that feeling. Because, yes, the social political thing is one thing. Even more so for me, I hate the fact that, when you say it's not important, it's like, well, it felt important enough to nab a couple Golden Globes.
Since when have they been important?
Yes, it's not. But projectively, that is important.
It gives the allure, or it gives the illusion, rather, of prestige that a movie is good or important enough to warrant awards. This, I did believe it won a Golden Globe maybe an Academy Award for Best Original Song.
Cool. So that upsets me. The The clunkiness of its messaging is especially upsetting to me because I'm very personally appalled. It is simply hypocritical. It is a hypocritical movie.
Well, and it's just such bullshit in its bones because it's about a man experiencing what is ostensibly is or has been an exclusively woman experience, to carry a child inside and to be pregnant. But it's written by two men. It's credited to Kevin Wade and Chris Conrad, and it's directed by Ivan Reitman. And what do Kevin Wade and Chris Conrad and Ivan Reitman know about being pregnant? Nothing from a woman's perspective. If you're a kind of person that can become pregnant, Ivan Reitman does not have that same perspective at all. And it comes across in every single moment. It's the bullshittiest, hackiest kind of nastiness where it's trying to be so achingly sincere and caring and understanding and funny about it with all the horrible saccharine sweetness of a fucking Hallmark card and the same amount of witticism. Like here are a bunch of jokes that are destined to not piss anybody off because there's no tooth to them. There's no edge. The perspective is the most hackneyed bullshit you'll find. It is awful. You'd think with this kind of premise, sky's the limit. It's full of potential comedy. It's full of potential body horror. It's full of potential interesting science fiction stuff. Like there's all this potential in the movie. It doesn't do anything with any of it.
Well, let me kind of amplify something you say there because I think this becomes all of this is bad and upsetting. I would be okay with these things being bad and upsetting if the movie was even remotely funny.
Sure. Yeah, if comedies can toe the line and be a little distasteful in the right ways, it's like exploitation. There's a permissiveness like, let's be bad. Let's set aside some time to be a little bit wicked or a little bit nasty.
And this is doubly insulting, I think, because of all of the talent involved. I mean, we have professed our love of Arnie movies on this show more times. Like, the evidence is there. You can look at the receipts. Go listen to our Commando episode.
Sure.
We love Arnie. So seeing him in this is just, and doing what he's being asked to do is very, very disheartening. Same goes with Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito, a titan of comedy, is never funny in this.
And acting and direction and writing.
Yes, he is absolutely nothing in this movie. And then there is Emma Thompson. Emma Thompson, a total luminary in the entertainment field. And she is wasted on what might be one of the most awful characters, certainly that I've seen this year.
Mm-hmm. She is a scientist that is basically the clumsy moron woman who is given every stereotypical moment of slapstick comedy that says, look at this clumsy moron who is just around to be a clumsy moron. The dance scene with the fucking toilet paper on her high heel.
That is perfectly emblematic of what this movie thinks is funny. Oh, Emma Thompson's clumsy and her and Arnold have a dance scene. Whoops, she's got toilet paper on her shoe. Gobbledy.
The best thing I can say about Junior is that it's got Christopher Maloney in it, and it doesn't give him enough screen time for his character to be bad.
He escapes unscathed. So that is a blessing in disguise for this movie.
The thing that pisses me off, even more than like the political statements and like, yes, I am pro-choice. This movie uses the kind of language of pro-choice politics against the message of being pro-choice. So that obviously pisses me off. But what makes me angrier is the fact that it's so achingly sincere and doesn't try to do anything that remotely resembles fun.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that at a certain point in this movie, Arnold is taken to some cultish retreat house of pregnant women to hide
drag.
I was going to get to that. He goes to this cultish retreat house, and it is where all these women are staying so that he can hide away during the final, weeks or whatever time. Who cares about fucking time in this movie?
He's going to the woman's banishment hut.
It is the cure for wellness camp for pregnant women. It is.
It's so stupid. It is the third act low point where like all his friends abandon him and they put him in some like, you know, like Lamaze cult for 3 weeks or whatever.
So here's the thing: is that Arnold shows up in drag, and it was at this point in the movie that Travis and I we were syncing up our watches that we had a moment of like the movie went here. And it's already, I mean, it's offensive, and they have to make up this whole plot, you know, like bullshit story about like, oh, you know, I was an athlete, and, you know, they pumped me full of steroids and stuff. That's why I look like this as a woman, but I still feel like a woman.
I'm all woman.
All this kind of stuff. And here's the thing. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a funny man.
Yeah, he's a good comedian.
Exceptionally funny. And this movie puts him in drag. And I'm not saying that you can't have a fun drag movie. It has been proven time and time again that you can have a very, very fun drag movie. Maybe it's offensive, maybe it's not. The point is you can do it.
But when drag is done poorly, it's fucking terrible.
And this is one of the worst examples of drag in a movie I've ever seen. For a movie that had to, I have not looked up the budget because I don't want to anger and depress myself anymore, but I'm sure Travis is Googling that as we speak.
It's a number that doesn't mean anything to me. Whatever the number is that they throw at me, it's too much money to have spent on this fucking garbage movie.
Yes. This drag makeup for Arnold with the wig and everything, it is...
At least it's a good wig.
Okay. Like...
I didn't see no lace on that front, honey.
It's still appalling the way that they integrate this. And it doesn't matter that Anna Gunn, Skylar White from Breaking Bad, shows up for, like, it's the same thing with Chris Maloney. She escapes unscathed. Like,
yeah, instead of the oh hey moment when you see somebody you really like in a movie like this show up, you get oh no, yeah. I can't believe they were subjected to this piece of shit movie.
I mean, the only relief is what you said. It's like, wow, they survived.
Yeah, and I take no issue if a movie wants to talk about sexism, misogyny, toxic masculinity,
sure,
pregnancy, fertility medicine. Like all these themes are inherently like really interesting to me, and I love to talk about them. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of why this movie, bungling it all so hard, hits close to home, is because I really like these themes. Because they're all very fascinating to me. It's like body horror. There's a bunch of this movie that reads as body horror and would actually perform pretty well as body horror if you remove the awful score. It's not badly composed, but it's so achingly saccharine. It's just like pouring maple syrup all over this movie. It's like, why do you make this? James Newton Howard, of course, he does very sweet and sincere music, but the fact that so much of this was clearly designed as like Monkey Shines, Deep Blue Sea, Jurassic Park, like we're playing God kind of stuff, and it's horrifying what's happening to this man's body. But the movie doesn't want you to focus on any of the disgust and the horror of any of that. It just wants you to think it's sweet and funny and sincere. And that's a lie. That is a total bullshit lie from fucking minute one.
Junior it's not only the worst movie I've watched this year, it is right beside Antebellum as the most toxic movie I've seen this year.
A movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger hands a big beaker of his own piss to Danny DeVito, that movie should be fucking hilarious, right?
A movie where Arnold gets pregnant should be funny. That's the bottom line. Like, Arnold, pregnant, sold.
A movie where Frank Langella is your villain?
Oh my
You gotta be better than fucking Cutthroat Island, my dude.
Poor Frank Langella, who is subjected to dialogue that clearly points him out as being, because there's all this queer coding in the relationship between Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Frank Langella has to come over and make a bunch of comments like, "Oh, how domestic of you."
Yeah, he's very judgy. He oddly enough, he's the only person who actually gets to be sexy in the film.
Oh,
like,
God, yeah.
Looks great in that suit. Goddamn.
Great beard.
And he does get the only laugh that I had while watching the movie. I can't tell if it's intentional or not, but there's a shot of him watching Arnold Schwarzenegger and Emma Thompson dance, and he's eating pigs in a blanket, and he's just noshing down on these pigs in a blanket.
Sadly.
It's just like, it's this bizarre reaction shot of him just like eating and watching dancing, and I'm just like, okay, that was like the only good shot in your movie.
Now, you also laughed at when the toilet paper, when she was trying to knock it off and she threw her shoe off. the band that's like it lands on somebody's table and the band that's playing stops and they have a close up of the lead singer and she looks at
reaction shot to the toilet paper.
Yeah, she looks at it and kind of shrugs and then just keeps on singing. That was also a laugh from you. I can't, tallying the 3 laughs or whatever it was. But Junior it's so representative to me of the kinds of movies that their messaging is very clear, and it's very clear to me to see the good intentions that they want to have, but every single element of the execution of this film completely negates any potential effectiveness of that messaging. Not to mention, the movie ends on a note where Arnold is eating cake off of a baby's foot. Like, yes.
Excuse me, sorry.
Which is I that's an image I have to live with now. And I hate Junior for doing that to me.
Yes. I mean, like, what sums up my extreme aversion and dislike to this film is about halfway through the movie, I had this horrible realization and I said, oh no, how long until he says my body, my choice? And you thought, your message to me was, you think? Do you really think?
Like, would they go there?
And I said, I do think. And sure enough, they make Arnold say it.
He basically grabs the camera and shoves it into his face so he can say it directly to the audience. It is that blunt. And the problem is that delivery of that line is in complete refutation of the actual messaging of the movie, which is that, no, you can't kill my baby. My baby's alive. I have to take this baby to term.
I wouldn't say it's in complete refutation. It's saying, yes, it is, it's his autonomy, which is the ultimate message of pro-choice. Pro-choice is not pro-abortion.
No,
Let's be clear.
But also there is so much coding with Frank Langella's villain character about like how he needs to maintain this baby and control this, and he's very much framed in sort of that he's the liberal professor, the educated type.
Sure.
And that is all there. And I think it feeds into the argument that this is a pro-life movie. Although if you asked anybody involved, they would completely flatly say it's the opposite.
But to hit every single stereotypical bullshit, men are like this, women are like this joke on the way. Like the scene where Arnold sits around with Danny DeVito's ex-wife character and
who's
they
also
eat all
pregnant.
The random fucking leftovers. Like, oh, isn't it funny that pregnant women have crazy cravings? Yeah, never heard that one before.
Oh, I mean,
go back to the fucking Hallmark card store and get some better jokes.
There's it's everything. When they say like, ooh, Arnold's been cooped up in the house, he's like, I want to go out. And he's like, all right, well, there's this, function that we're going to go to. Immediately, what's his reaction? Ooh, what am I going to wear?
I don't have anything to wear.
It is that level. And there is no joke that escapes that level of writing. Everything is on that level. It is that repetitively awful.
Anyway.
Well, then we watched Willy Milly. So
a truly non-Canadian film.
How this movie was not Canadian to me. So Willy Milly was brought to our attention by a loyal listener, JT. We'd never heard of it. We managed to get our hands on a copy of it. Not the greatest copy, unfortunately. So that I will say that affected our watch of it. But it also, I think, kind of contextualized the movie in a very appropriate way. You said to me that this is like watching old Mystery Science Theater 3000 movies with beer goggles on.
Yeah, the quality of the rip that we found on YouTube was so bad that it genuinely affected our watch of the movie. So I am perfectly willing to concede that, like, if I had actually watched this movie in high definition in its original aspect ratio, I probably would have had a better time with it.
Sure.
Because I would have actually gotten a sense of like the real framing. Like, really dorky technical note here. The VHS rip that we watched of this was full frame. So the full 4:3 image was like the full frame of the cell, like the actual 35 millimeter cell, or I'm not sure if they shot this on 35 or 16. The copy we watched was too low res to tell, but it's clear that for theatrical releases and like when they've aired this on TV in widescreen format, that they've actually cropped it down from the full frame, and the framing is much better. Like when you and I watched this version, it's like every single shot framed was like, why do these people have all this fucking headroom? Like, what idiot composed these shots? It looked awful. But the widescreen version and the crops I saw, it's like, oh, somebody actually, paid attention to how the shot should be composed. So I'm going to complain about how bad the cinematography is, but honestly, that's skewed, because if I had had a better copy of the movie to watch, then I might feel differently.
So now that you've all been enthused by aspect ratio discussion about a movie where a girl wishes for a penis, that's what happened. So this movie starring Pamela Segal, who most will actually know as Pamela Adlon, very, very respected and storied comedian. Her name is Milly, and she's a tomboy type. She is very, very enthusiastic about astronomy.
She's 14.
She's 14, and she wishes deep down in her heart that she was a boy, because she doesn't feel very good. She has a neighbor friend who's, always, they're dolling each other up and putting on perfumes and stuff. And Millie's just not into it. She's like, man.
There is a question of like, does she wish she was actually a boy, or does she just wish she was respected more for who she was?
Well, sure, because as we see in the movie, she makes comments like, boys have it so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual way this movie opens, there is a leprechaun played by Seth Green.
He's not literally a leprechaun.
He might as well be.
Sure, he's like the magic character. He's like basically like a Ray Bradbury character who blows into town and sells the magical device. It's the monkey's paw moment.
Like who? We never know like whose kid is he. He's introduced just walking down the neighborhood with his little radio flyer wagon. He's got a bunch of stuff, and he's selling things to some people who are just sitting out in their yards. And this is like, I don't even know how old he would have been at this point, but this is like just fetal.
He's eensy weensy itsy bitsy little kid.
Yes.
He's got his grown up teeth in his mouth because his teeth are trying to escape his mouth.
That's what I said. Yes.
We know that Seth Green is on the small side just generally. So I really don't know. Time is one of the things that kind of disappears when you watch this movie. It takes place in a never time. And for him to be the one that opens up this movie, like he's on this trip of walking around the neighborhood with his radio flyer, picking up stuff from like yard sales. And for me, that's such an inconsequential thing for this movie, because it's not really at all thematically concerned with like what the movie wants to do or say. But this is like the big problem with this movie is like it's not sure where to spend its time and like what things to show as important plot beats or thematic beats and like what to deliver on, because it'll do stuff and then abandon it like that.
Yes, a big, as far as the technical discussion about this movie, the edit of this movie does it no favors. Things just kind of jump from place to place. You hit the nail on the head when we were doing our screening, in which you said that the movie never establishes any sense of flow or rhythm. It is nothing but fits and starts.
The edit is awful on this movie, which may actually stem from screenwriting. Like, transitions have to be written for. And I don't know in this case, I haven't read the screenplay, like what the kind of transitions were as written. But I can tell you, as they are in the movie, like they're horribly clunky. They just don't feel good. When the movie moves from one scene to the next, it's like an act of brutality. It's like, ugh.
Well, so the plot is that Millie gets some magic, I don't know, goof or dust or something. I don't know what it is.
Some magic fucking, no, it's some magic bottle of shit, salt, whatever. That's like, if you wait till an eclipse and then you pour the shit in a circle, and then at the moment of the eclipse you make a wish, your wish will come true.
Yes. So Millie uses the dick potion, and the next day she wakes up and she has a penis. And she decides in this moment that she wants to portray herself outwardly as a boy, but as she states it, she will still be a girl on the inside. This was sort of a surprising element to this movie, because I assume, like, I think this movie's from like 1986, and our immediate assumption was like, this is going to be incredibly wrong-headed, horribly outdated topically, and maybe we will stem some humor from that. And I was somewhat surprised to find that while there is an element of that in the movie later, which we may or may not get to, but that when it came to discussing the gender role that Millie, who eventually decides to go as Willy, as far as the discussions that were happening about that, it was surprisingly more nuanced than I expected.
Yeah, it actually explores a lot more scenarios than I thought it would, but that's really like the only thing on its mind is it's trying to take Millie, who is now Willy, and sort of run this character through the gauntlet of like all these, battle of the sexes and, teen romance situations that it can sort of think of.
It's a deeply uncomfortable movie. I will admit that. But at the same time, there is a refreshingness to admitting that kids have these kinds of feelings and discussions at this age, at the age when they are chemically coming into sexual maturity. And like it is deeply uncomfortable.
Sure. But the way the movie approaches it a lot of ways is so bizarrely puritanical that the sort of clash is like, it feels like whiplash. Because early on there's a scene where Millie, before the sort of genital switch, is hanging out with her best friend Stephanie, and they're getting ready to go to a dance. And Stephanie puts perfume, I think it's Shalimar, on Millie. And one of the things that Stephanie says, like, if you haven't gone all the way with a boy by 15, then your insides start to rust. And I was like, that's a bizarrely kind of crass statement for this movie right out of the gate. Because I wasn't really sure like how crass this movie was going to play it, like how blue it was going to be. Turns out not very. It has some fun with profanity later on when it discovers the word shit and tries to say the word shit as much as possible.
Well, what happens is that Willy, or Millie's, she's Willy at this point, Willy's father, who's played by the absolute gem John Glover, who also escapes this movie unscathed, I feel, because he's just fantastic. He is actually very, very receptive to Millie becoming Willy, because he's like, great, I'll have a son now, and I'm going to teach him the ropes about how to be masculine. And of course, these are all very stereotypical things, like you got to learn to swear.
Yeah, as we all know, profanity, highly exclusive to men.
Highly masculine. Now, I'll say this before we get back onto that. This has one advantage over Junior. At least one woman is credited as a screenwriter, Carla Rubin.
Thank God for that, because a movie like this desperately needs it. It is based on a story by a guy named Alan Friedman. I believe the story was originally published in a magazine, if I'm not mistaken. But
it sounds like a magazine story. So
sure.
So John Glover teaches Willy to swear, like you got because there's some bullies that are knocking him around and being shitty at school. So he says, you got to stand up to him. You got to learn to fight. So takes him down to the basement and is trying to teach him to box and stuff. And is saying, you got to swear, you got to get that damn bastard and stuff like that. And John Glover is just impossible not to be delightful in his performance. I mean, there's literally
You're
a moment.
My boy.
He calls him my boy. There's a moment where he is in the bathroom brushing his teeth and singing The Man on the Flying Trapeze. Delightful.
He's a great character actor, and I love seeing him in this movie. Pamela Siegel, now Pamela Adlon, is given a really tough role because she does carry this movie.
I mean, she can't save it, but
she's in damn near every scene. And no, she can't save it, but I feel like there's so much weight being placed on her shoulders as the lead in this film. And does she do the gender bent stuff okay? I guess, but it is disappointingly uninterested in exploring anything thematic other than just like a bare mention of it. The movie flirts with so many weird things. Like you feel early on that's like, okay, Millie's best friend Stephanie, I bet once Millie becomes Willy, I bet they're going to do a romantic thing between Willy and Stephanie.
And they do
it for 2 scenes, and then the movie completely forgets it ever happened.
And that is pretty much every potential plotline thread except for one, which ends up being the main romance of the movie. Otherwise, any kind of intriguing execution of this premise gets discarded because the movie is just so scatterbrained.
Yeah.
In terms, like, there was a point in the movie where you asked me, like, what is the end game? Like, what's the plot of this movie other beyond the premise?
Right. There's no like end game made immediately apparent. Even Freaky Friday, I think they set out some sort of end goal, like this thing is going to happen to you, or there's some event you have to be at, you know. And I thought for sure, because this movie starts off with a dance, I was like, oh, something has to happen before the next big dance. And eventually the film does end with another dance, but they don't set that as like a goalpost early on. Like,
no,
this thing has to happen and I have to sort my life out before then. So there's really no pressure. So the movie feels very slack, like things are just happening, but it's not really adding up to much.
Now, because it was such a main criticism of mine with Junior, I do want to talk about it with Willy Milly. Willy Milly is pretty much 95% unfunny. Like, it's just not funny. Part of that is that I don't think, like, going in, you expect, okay, a person who's never had a penis suddenly has a penis. Let's just roll off some penis jokes.
Let's say the word penis once, even. No, never. Let's say the word dick once. No, never. They don't say penis. They don't say dick. The word cock is written, and that is one of the biggest laughs in the movie.
It is the best section of the movie. After this training sequence with his father, John Glover, Willie decides, like, okay, I got to learn how to be a guy. And part of that is swearing. So there is this montage of Willie and her friend Stephanie. Stephanie's going to, like, basically do flashcards with her. It's like, I'm going to show you a word and you got to react to it. And the first card she pulls up, it just says cock. And Willie has nothing to say. Then we see Willie walking around the forest by themselves, just cursing, trying to figure out cursing. And it's funny. Like, it is legitimately funny because,
well, and it's literally the only sequence in this movie. This montage is the only sequence in this movie that finds a sense of rhythm.
It's got rhythm. It has got an intended goal for the humor, which is, okay, Willie has to become more of, quote, a man. That involves learning how to swear. What is the process of learning how to swear? And it is going through all of these ridiculous, silly things, like calling, like, what was it? Like a dumb suck?
Dumb suck. For whatever reason, that seems to be a profane word, an insult in this universe.
But she comes up with all of these, variations on shit and stuff, like sit on it, eat it, lick it, and all, and it's funny. Now, Pamela Segal, who's now Pamela Adlon, it is very clear just watching this movie, you're like, this person is going to have a career, because if she can handle this and escape as well as she does, she's got the goods.
Yeah, well, and luckily it turns out that Pamela Adlon is a fantastic actress, and clearly a highly talented and hardworking individual. So that's lovely to see. But this movie is just on a technical level, like the worst kind of junk. I mean, it's like near amateur on so many levels with regards to technical. And I'm willing to admit that, like, if somebody were to give me this movie in high definition with like a decent transfer, like to kind of give me the experience that maybe the filmmakers intended, like I would probably think it was a little bit better, because the sound on the rip we watched was like,
we have to admit that part of this is on us and the quality of the version that we were able to watch. Even so, though, whereas Junior's not interesting, and I would venture to call Junior boring in a sense, but Junior was exceptionally bad, amazingly, impressively terrible and infuriating. Willy Milly is mostly kind of par for the course boring.
Yeah, boring and like bad. Like, I'm not going to let it off the hook for being a bad movie. Like, I think this is forgettable, disposable. And it has the same problem as Junior. We're like, okay, here's a wacky premise for you with tons of potential. What are they going to do with it? Oh, one of the most boring executions. Like, here's my overarching argument here. You're given these two gender bending premises that are ripe with potential for body horror and blue comedy and interesting commentary, and you abandon all of that, and instead you do this execution that is more focused on what boring, waspy Americans want to see at the movies. That, to me, is offensive because you're just creating this bland product where it's you have all these interesting ingredients that interest me thematically, but you're going to do the most boring execution of this idea that I can conceive of. Like, wow, that is extraordinarily frustrating. And it's the same problem with both films.
So when we were watching Willy Milly, you made, I think, a really prescient observation in that the premise of Willy Milly, and I would say this about Junior as well, is something that should have been given to somebody like John Waters.
Mm-hmm, sure.
They are premises that are knowingly, right out on Front Street, tasteless.
Exploitative.
Yes.
Campy.
And that on its own is not a bad thing. Because as we have seen from the John Waters movies we've covered on this show, tastelessness can lead to projects that actually have a lot of genuine sincerity behind them. Because look at movies like, look at a movie like Serial Mom. Serial Mom is incredibly endearing, but it is never burdened by the weight of its seeming sincerity.
It is also packed full of fuck you attitude toward the most boring, bland, waspy nonsense that so many movies demand.
So we're going to wrap up here in a second, but there is something very, very specific that we have to talk about in Willy Milly. In the climax of this film, Willy decides, because she has begun to have romantic feelings for one of her new guy friends at school, and
wouldn't it be awful for a boy to have romantic feelings for another boy? Wouldn't that be terrible?
That we're not going to say what this movie says, but if you can think of the worst way that it could go with that story, trust me.
They do use a certain F word, which I'm not going to repeat, but you all know what I'm talking about.
It is very bad.
They brush off queerness as like horny confusion in this movie, which again is like this whole like queerness as a phase bullshit that is just that is toxic awfulness. Yeah,
it is bad. Junior has way more checks in the toxic column than Willy Milly.
Sure, but that doesn't let Milly Willy off the hook.
No, of course not. But so Willy decides that no, I want to get rid of my dick. So of course she has to visit the leprechaun, and when they get there, he's not there. But Stephanie is like, hey, he left a note for you.
Oh my God. So the movie builds up to this moment where it's like, okay, the magical realism premise, it's like, it was established as like this magical thing will grant you this wish. And I'm thinking like, well, what is it going to take for her to like reverse this? And the movie builds to this moment where it's like, okay, we're finally going to find out from magic baby Seth Green, like what it's going to take to write this grievous penising. And, the movie cuts to the close-up of this handwritten note, and it is so fucking illegible that I just lost it. I mean, I hurt myself laughing. I thought I was going to have a hernia. I thought I was in labor like Junior. I considered telling you to stop and like pause the movie and give me a break. Especially because the movie follows that up with another huge, baffling laugh.
Okay, so earlier in the movie, shortly after Milly has become Willy, John Glover gives Willy his father's watch, and of course it was passed down from his father to blah blah blah.
Symbolism, everybody.
Yeah. So it gives him this watch, and the whole deal, I guess, with this ending, because we will never know what that note said, is that they had to enact this spell at a certain time. So Willy is continually checking his watch, and they're climbing up to the roof and they're setting this whole thing up, but they also have this like geode crystal rock thing that I guess was included in the note to be able to reverse this wish.
I don't know. I initially thought like, whatever fucking magic gadget that Seth Green gave them was like, I don't know, the Avengers Cube or whatever. It's just like say the magic words or whatever the fuck that letter said. Sure. Willy is standing on the roof with Stephanie, and they're looking up at the night sky, and Willy is checking the pocket watch, and then at the certain time when whenever it is, Willy throws the watch. Maybe, I don't know what happens. The movie was too low res to tell, because you cut to the reverse where it's like the hand throwing whatever it is into the sky, and it just turns out like this salami covered meteorite hurling out into the void.
I don't know if that was at all intelligible, but
it's as intelligible as the movie was, really.
Oh shit. So
that is the hardest I've ever laughed on an episode of GenreVision.
It's that or Racho ran, so
no, this was longer.
Oh, but
when I was watching the movie, I was still laughing so hard from the fucking illegible letter that when that happened, I just was transported to an alternate dimension of funny. It was painful.
If this was a versus, it's an Alien versus Predator situation where whoever wins, we lose. But Willy Milly, at the very least, had that kind of unintentionally climactic absurdity.
I guess if you're gonna watch one, Willy Milly is the easier watch because it's more vapid.
I
don't know. It's more vapid. It says less. There's less in it that's infuriating, but it's so technically inept in a lot of ways, and I'm just like, why waste your time?
Well, no, I don't recommend either of these movies. Who knows if anyone will have the experience we particularly had by the end of it, Willy Milly. But I can safely say that the only thing that Junior is good for is never being seen by anyone.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It is that repulsive to me.
Set the controls for the heart of the sun, baby.
Exactly.
Goodbye.
Exactly. So I'm bummed that we had to end Screwy September on that note. At the very least, for the month that we're doing comedies, it ended on the note of Travis and I absolutely losing our minds.
It had the biggest laugh of Screwy September.
Of potentially the show.
Yeah.
So we have to give it that credit. But now we have to head over to the shelf where we pick some movies that act as good pairings or substitutes for our main topic, and we encourage you, loyal listeners, to go to GenreVision.com, comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks, and we will feature them in next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for Junior and Willy Milly?
Addams Family Values, because it's everything these movies aren't. It is smart. It is hilariously funny. It is technically polished as fuck. It is full of fuck you commentary to the kind of stupid conservative 90s waspish suburban bullshit that I loathe personally. Addams Family Values is an utter classic. The first Addams Family movie is pretty good. It's still full of wonderful jokes and incredible technique in filmmaking, but Addams Family Values is full of the commentary that just is so wickedly delicious, and the acting in it is incredible. I mean, the only person I feel like who doesn't get a chance to shine is the kid who plays Pugsley. Oddly enough, his character is a little bit underwritten for that movie, especially because Wednesday kind of takes control. Christina Ricci, they knew she was just so awesome.
Yeah.
So they did more with her, I believe. But her sort of character building throughout the movie is just incredible. And I love the portrayal of Gomez and Morticia as a couple. They're just so wonderful.
The best. I mean, in contention for the greatest romantic couple in at least the cinema that we have experienced in our lives.
Yeah. And I mean, I was looking at Joan Cusack's character and was like, how incredible is her performance in this movie? And then she's paired with Christopher Lloyd, who is also doing I don't know, maybe some of his career best work.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's getting to act on a level in that movie that is channeling classic, going back to silent film comedy. You can just cut to a reaction shot of him and it will bust you up laughing.
Oh, it's so great. So great. Anyway.
Addams Family Values, a total unassailable classic.
Yeah, and a pregnancy comedy. And they at least the baby is delivered in the first couple minutes and they're done with it.
Yep. I'm going to have a baby.
Right now.
Right now. It's great. Amazing movie. Well, for my shelf pick, I really honed in on the fact that Junior and Willy Milly had exploitative, trashy premises that they did not exploit. they
weren't trashy enough. They were utter garbage, but yet weren't trashy enough to be fun.
So I have to pick something that is nothing but exploitative trash, and potentially one of the best examples of exploitative trash from this particular outfit. This is Terror Firmer, directed by Lloyd Kaufman from Troma. If you have your opinions about Troma movies, I completely 100% understand and have no problem ceding the argument to you. However, I think Terra Firma might be the best Troma movie, as I think it encapsulates everything that their kind of mission statement is about. It takes place on the set, filming a fictional Troma movie, and it captures their ethos. It captures their feelings about art, all while also being about a gender-bending serial killer and a giant fat man getting eaten by an escalator. Just all kinds of craziness. Your mileage will absolutely vary with a movie like Terra Firma, but if you can stomach it, I think it's like that and The Toxic Avenger are kind of the necessary Troma watches in my book. As far as the movies they produce themselves. I can't say I highly recommend Terra Firma, but if that's a wheelhouse you feel comfortable enough in, and you have not seen Terra Firma rather, I have to recommend it. But I might get in trouble if anybody watches it on my recommendation. Just, I tried to warn you. Now, as far as the listener shelf picks for last week, on our episode on Delicatessen, Mr. Milksteak had Hannibal, the television series, and The Lady in the Water, which he says might act as an anti-shelf pick for some people, but has a lot of thematic echoes that we saw in Delicatessen. JT, who we have to, I guess, thank for Willy Milly. No, seriously, thank you for that, JT. We love getting turned on to movies that we didn't know about. JT went with Eating Raoul, which is in the Criterion Collection and is pretty good as I remember it. I definitely need to revisit that. Pale Fire went with Moulin Rouge. And Eric Fuchs had A Boy and His Dog, a wonderful adaptation of a Harlan Ellison story. And Stephen Nesbello went with Soylent Green. And we might talk about why Stephen Nesbello went with that in a little bit. But first, let's do some currently consuming. Nom, 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 nom. Travis, what's been on your plate?
I watched an anime movie, and it's rare that I watch anime movies because I find my mileage varies so heavily with anime. And there are certain things about anime that I just plain don't like, especially when it comes to anime series and the sort of same story beats that they hit and things like that. But I watched a movie called Weathering with You, and it's from the director and the same team that did a movie called Your Name a few years ago. And Your Name was very good. It was actually an excellent gender-bending sci-fi story that did indulge in some of the stuff that bugs me about anime, but like everything else about the movie was so good that I was just blown away by it. And Weathering with You kind of hews closely to some like magical girl anime stories, but is so well executed on a technical level that I can't help but recommend it. It's got a great soundtrack, fantastic animation, good voice acting, and then some other sort of interesting, curious political observations as well. A pretty cool flick, but definitely not as good as Your Name. If you're going to see any movie from this particular crew first, I definitely recommend Your Name. But Weathering You is not a bad choice. Anyway, that's all I got.
Well, on my end, I'm going to be really quick. I watched a new release movie. It's called Ava, starring Jessica Chastain, Colin Farrell, John Malkovich, probably some other people I'm forgetting. 'Cause here's the thing. We'll link to my review if you want to hear my full thoughts. Ava is a very, very boring, forgettable attempt at action filmmaking from Tate Taylor, of all people.
Whomst?
He did that Ma movie and The Help.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of his first real foray into this kind of action. I don't know if he'll have another one because
he was the director, writer, producer in 2003 of a short film called Chicken Party.
Word. Sure. Ava, there's a really interesting possibility to the movie in that it is your stereotypical super awesome assassin lead character. But the wrinkle is that they get into Ava's actual life. She's a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And throughout the movie, she is continually fighting those impulses, and they are continually being used against her by her family members. Her mom is played by Gina Davis, which is always awesome to see her pop up in a movie. When the movie stops and just has a scene between Ava and her mother, that was what I was much more interested in, was like, yeah, doing your super assassin story, but adding this particular wrinkle could really add some new edges to this kind of a story. But the movie eventually just falls into every single stereotype of this subgenre that you expect. The action is not interestingly executed in the filmmaking or the story or anything like that. And by the end of it, I felt like I just watched, I think my synopsis was, it felt like a weak pilot for a TV series that never got picked up. The story even ends that way, probably because for some reason they thought they might make sequels. Who knows? But if you want to read my full thoughts, we'll link to my review. Otherwise, Ava, I just feel bad that Jessica Chastain was in it, and now Travis has sent me a poster for Chicken Party. And what the hell is this?
It's a mini movie, Drew.
It's a mini movie, all right.
Look at that cast though: Allison Janney, Octavia Spencer, Tate Taylor himself, and Melissa McCarthy.
That is quite the lineup.
Tate's got some connections.
That is quite a party of chicken. But Ava, don't watch it.
Really dodged that bullet. Whew, thank you.
Yes, but let's close things out with our
comment of the week.
And the comment of the week is very, very sweet. I mean, we had some great comments, including some full reviews of some of the stuff we talked about, like I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So you should definitely go check out those. But Stephen Nesbella just said, well, I've never seen this movie, but that didn't stop me from enjoying the episode. Thank you very much. Of course, he also says, looking forward to the pain and anguish of next week's episode. Well, I hope it was worth it, Stephen, because it was absolutely pain and anguish. But it is very refreshing to hear that y'all can enjoy the episodes even without seeing the movies. And we hope we provided you with that, because I definitely hope none of you watch Junior. And I do not recommend it at all. But yeah, next week, we're kicking off something special. Of course, it's October, and we did a fun poll that was instigated by our Patreon people who are awesome and wonderful. They submitted some potential theme months for us, and we put them up for a poll. The poll is closed as of now, and the winner is going to be Haunted Media, which sounds awesome, and we have actually put out the entire schedule. You can go to GenreVision.com and click on schedule. You can see all the movies we're doing, and we're kicking things off next week with a global gonzo. We're doing Demons, the Italian movie. I believe it's directed by Umberto Bava. Gee, oh man, this is a long night.
Give that another
long episode. Yes. But yeah, we're going to kick it off with Demons, which is a haunted movie, I would make the argument for. Yes, Lamberto Bava. And yeah, Travis has never seen Demons before, so it'll be pretty interesting, I think, to get his take on it. And it's been a while since I've seen it, I think about a year or so. So I'm interested to revisit it. And we'll be doing a whole bunch of haunted media, different types of haunted media every week throughout all of October. Go check that schedule out at GenreVision.com and come visit us next week when we talk about Demons. As always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Millie.
So dejected. Oh, don't worry. Things will I believe things will be better next week, buddy. And we will see you next week.
Right here on GenreVision.